Yeah, check it. Yeah. We so high, play to watch it. They so low, I'm in my parents' apartment. Remember when had a few compartments where I stored my shit when I went the hardest. Now my whole team hardened. I'm Chandler Parsons. We up to something that's so astounding, straight off the charts, setting brand new marks. Got 5 trunks that we about to spark. Higher than a chimney, a girl when I get with me, but leave it like
Let that go a little longer because that's my cousin. He was spinning a little fire. Bruce will know a little bit about that once the real thing gets out. But it's been a little while. But podcast numero dos. I learned that when I lived in Arizona. But we're good to go over here. It's been some time, but some shit has happened in the last few weeks, wouldn't you say?
I would. How's it going, ladies and gents?
Yeah, we are sitting here actually pre-Eagles Cowboys, and we're gonna do some logistical stuff here because we've been drinking a little bit. Would you say that's correct?
About a half a beer, 3 shots, but who's counting?
He's counting. I believe so, but there will be more of that. But we're obviously getting a little pumped up for this Eagles game here. But when I talk about logistically what we're doing, we want to talk a little non-Eagle stuff for a little bit. We're going to watch the game, and in all likelihood, we'll obviously come back a little bit more inebriated, and then we're going to talk. And obviously it'll be just after the game ends, so it'll be interesting. But we're going to get started and talk a little bit of Phillies that. Normally it's the winter. Shit's going on, but, spit something, Bruce.
Well, let me just start off by saying I think it's good that we made the decision to talk Phillies or just in general anything that's not Eagles first. Right now we're all very excited about this Eagles team and not so much especially about the Phillies or the Sixers. So it's good to kind of just force the issue a little bit with those teams. But we're going to start with the Phillies and some of the action that went down or lack thereof in the winter meetings. We did have a little bit of movement with Jimmy Rollins and the trade to the Los Angeles Dodgers, as well as Antonio Bastardo being shipped out as well.
Yeah, that was obviously it's not a huge move, but it's still a momentous move. Because that's basically him and Utley essentially are the face of the franchise, and he started first, or rather came to the league first. So it's like a changing of the guard when someone like J-Roll or they always like to compare him to Jeter leaves, and they were on WIP. They had these audio clips going, giving me some goosebumps. All the big plays he had. It's like first hit. Inside the park homer, big hits, in the playoffs, obviously, World Series type of stuff. And, of course, anytime you're going to hear Harry Kalas's voice, you're going to get some goosebumps. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, whenever a player like Jimmy Rollins and some of the other players that have been around for a while, when they do eventually leave, you're going to get to hear the great Harry's voice, and that always brings chills. But, I was a little bit emotional about the Rollins move. I didn't think that would be the first move that went down. But overall, I'm happy for him because I do believe he has a little bit left in the tank, and I'd like to see him be able to make the most of that.
Yeah, I hope he's rejuvenated a little bit, starts, running out ground balls a little bit more, maybe fewer pop-ups now that he's and lazy fly balls now that he's not in a bandbox. But
he's in Cali. He's not quite back home, but he's gonna have a lot more familiar faces in the stadium. I think that's gonna add a little bit more mojo to his game, so to speak.
Yeah, and obviously it's maybe interesting to talk about J-Roll, but through and through, we are Phillies fans, and I caught myself getting a little excited. Definitely not the right word, but okay, making some moves, getting some stuff in return. But it took me maybe a couple hours, and it just dawned on me: there's no reason that I should be happy about these trades, because not that it would have been feasible a couple years ago or last season, but first of all, it's Ruben Amaro making the moves, so that should tell you one thing. But then at the same time, we are 2 years behind, and it's going to hurt what we get in return. So at the same time, I'm like, okay, finally they're moving on, but it's so late that it's like I can't even be happy about it, because it's just the fact that it's 2 years, maybe even 3 years removed. It's still hurting our franchise, despite the fact that they are finally trying to take a step forward.
You know, I'd have to check our last podcast. I'm not sure if we mentioned this, but you know, I believe Ruben is his own worst enemy. He is a Philadelphian through and through. I'm not sure if he's from Philadelphia, but having ties to the team and everything like that has kind of made him somewhat of a fan. And that allowed him to make the mistake of holding on to these players for a little bit too long. Not that they're washed up, but you want to take a little bit of example of, you know, what some of the other teams like the Red Sox do, and some of the other teams that get creative with trades, maybe trading a guy or making a move, you know, that's unexpected to make sure you get your future locked down. And I feel like what he's done is put his players in a position where their best years are all behind them. And now he's still asking for high value, you know, in return with trades. And it's just not going to happen that way. So we look bad. We look bad at the winter meetings. I'm sure he was aggressive in trying to make moves, but the rest of the league doesn't really feel like what we're offering is enough to give up the prospects that we personally, as a Philadelphia franchise, need to build our team back to where we used to be.
Yeah, and it's funny because whether it's any business, you're always, you know, anything you always read, you want to be proactive. There's nothing about this regime that was proactive except when what's his name? Who's president now? Pat Gillick. When he was the GM, he was proactive about getting pieces to fill out the team to help us win a championship and fight for and get close to championships for a few years. And we had that run. The window was, as always, smaller than you think it is, but you have to be proactive. There's nothing proactive about this. And that's what I don't like about the fact that Amaro is still here. The ownership and the people who are making decisions that are not proactive. They're keeping a guy around that clearly failed. And I don't like, that's the other thing about like me not being excited about it, because we're the same guys in charge that basically, and again, Gillick is back, but I still don't have confidence that we're going to get something great in return and really turn this around.
You know, I remember a number of years ago, it was actually the year before the Phillies won the World Series. I watched an interview with Pat Gillick. He talked about his years in Seattle when, you know, he was able to turn that team around into a championship team. And he just said, you know, I work hard, but for whatever reason, Lady Luck follows me. I get lucky and am able to put together championship caliber teams. And lo and behold, the following year, we were where we were, you know, competing and winning lots of games and eventually winning a World Series. I'm not saying that this is going to happen with this team, but as far as what this team needs to undertake, which is a complete overhaul of their roster and you know, a rebuild, I believe he will eventually, you know, have some success as long as he's willing to stick around and the franchise is willing to stick with him. Ruben Amaro, on the other hand, you know, I'm not sure, obviously as fans, we don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but if the season, depending on what happens, isn't his last, then there's no reason for us as fans to believe that the Phillies will be able to figure it out, because he's made some very questionable moves. You know, a lot of it probably has something to do with, like I said, kind of looking through it, the situation through the eyes of a fan and loving these players, the Rollins, the Utleys, the Howards, the Hamels, you know, Ruiz, and just kind of wanting to hold on to them because we as fans love them. I mean, we paid the money to see these guys on the field. And that's part of the problem. You know, we had our attendance took a dip this year, but overall, you know, you put a bunch of guys out there that no one's ever heard of, and everyone remembers how the Phillies used to be, with the way that the Philadelphia fans treated them and didn't really support them. You're going to be in the exact same position.
Well, what's interesting to me, though, you say, like, he's thinking like a fan. I understand. I'm not the typical Philly fan. One, I'm more optimistic than the typical Philly fan. And I'm also probably have, a little bit more like long-term perspective as a lot of Philly fans. But, and I say that, I wrote an article on Bleacher Report when Utley was having the knee issues. I wrote an article that said, if he comes back, establishes the fact that he is, healthy again at that time, that was like maybe 2-3 years ago, that they should trade him. Not only for the fact that that's probably the most value you're going to get for him, and he is my favorite player, and I prefaced with that a little whiskey down for Bruce, by the way.
Fourth shot of the night.
He's not counting. But I said, for Utley's career to become a DH in the AL, and because there's more value in the AL because of that, we should trade him. We're going to get the most value. And again, he's my favorite player, but I said that years ago. I actually felt, though, like maybe not 2 years ago, but certainly last year, a lot of fans were looking for trades at the deadline, and there were none, and people were pissed. So I don't know. I just really wish that he would go. But you talk about this season, depending on what happens. In what scenario, like this team's going to be bad. What are they going to do where he keeps his job? Like, what would they have to do?
Well, I think it's going to play itself out. So this is how I see it. The Phillies won't compete for anything major this year. If for whatever reason there are still some of the major names on the team, come the trade deadline, which I believe is in July, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You will have teams that are going to be a lot more aggressive with wanting to give up picks, and that will be where the Phillies make their money. Because if Utley's going out there and performing, and you hope that if Hamels is still on the team, he's performing, and Papelbon, these are guys that teams will make moves for. Everyone needs a strong, second baseman. Utley can do a lot of things in the field and with his bat. Hamels is an ace pitcher. Papelbon, obviously, is coming off a really good season. All three. I guess Papelbon's contract's a little bit ridiculous, but the other two players in Hamels and Utley have manageable contracts for other teams. A guy like Howard, on the other hand, is someone who, unless the Phillies are willing to buy him out, he's going to be here for a while longer. But I believe that, if those guys perform well, which we believe, is definitely possible, Ruben can save his job by making moves at the deadline and turning it around. And Phillies fans, I have great news for you. It is totally possible to get, at that point, and in that scenario, good enough prospects to have this rebuild not be multi-year. We're still talking about, maybe 1 or 2 seasons, but those 1 or 2 seasons, being able to actually see with your own eyes, improvements to where you feel confident that we will be able to get back to the chip.
Well, I hope so, but, we'll see. But I want to talk about, unfortunately, the game that I wasn't paying too much attention to. Yes, I'm talking about our 7-6. Unfortunately, I had like drinking and going out kind of on my mind, and then I was supposed to leave once the game was over, and then it went into OT and all that stuff. But, since we talked, they've won 2 games, and they've taken some real good teams to the wire.
I believe they're either 2-4 or 2-5 since the last time. Well, since they won their first game of the season. As someone who's watched the vast majority of their games this year, where they are now is definitely, they're a lot further along than they were. That being said, they are still clearly not even being close to where we would want them to be, with for the most part having, a lot of the players that we plan on rebuilding with in place. And it's a little bit worrisome, but my message or my opinion on it is, at this point, you have to trust in the overall scheme and numbers of what this ownership group is trying to do. You don't have a choice. I mean, you can hate, you can choose to not believe in them or whatever it may be, but it's something where if you're a diehard fan, you kind of have to look on the optimistic side. And I see a bunch of guys going out there, despite of what everyone else says, despite of what the franchise is trying to do. I see a bunch of kids going out there and bleeding for this city. None of them are from Philadelphia. None of them, probably thought they would be in this situation, or maybe even think they'll be here for the rest of their careers, even for a long period of time. But they still give every ounce of whatever they've got, and that to me is enough to at least care.
Yeah, I mean, these are not, you say, like, not from Philly. Some of them actually are, but these are Philly type guys, and that's the culture you're building. And I mean, we could talk about that for a while, but I think we talked about that last time plenty. I just think it's remarkable now that you got Carter Williams got some games under his belt. They're starting to get a little more familiar with each other. Obviously, we know what. Despite the fact they didn't play, we know what. What the? I can't think of nothing right now.
You're talking about
McDaniels. Yeah, we know what McDaniels can bring to the table, and he's got a lot of potential. We've seen Noel play better.
Can I just say, Ezra was about to get into some numbers here, which I'm definitely interested to see and hear what he has to say. But I'm just going to say this now. My relationship, and I can call it that, with Nerlens Noel as a fan has been up and down. It's been a bumpy road for us. And right now I think I'm in a good a place with him as I possibly could be, even though the last two games offensively, he's looked like someone who doesn't have a role in the NBA. I see a guy who athletically outshines every single person in the game on a game-to-game basis. I see a guy who has very little confidence in his offensive game.
Yes.
Rushes it. But still, defensively, and I actually sent a text message to Ezra last night, is his instincts and combined with his athleticism is something you cannot teach. His jumping ability, his quickness with his leap is just, it's I've never seen anything like it. There's plays where guys driving to the lane will beat his man and drive into the lane. And by the time the guy's damn near releasing the ball, Nerlens' feet are still on the ground. And he's able to just jump and block it. And I thought Thaddeus Young, the former Sixer, had quick feet. Nerlens makes him look like a sloth.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's obviously it's rough to watch in patches. It's obviously improved a little bit now. I mean, when you take a team that's now after the win 19-4, a game and a half out of the best record in the NBA to overtime, and you were up 18, and obviously that's as you told me earlier offline, obviously life or a lesson to be learned there, but you can see that there's something there, and clear like the talent disparity is ridiculous, but they're still, because of some of the guys that they have that do have that talent and just the way they play and then the culture they're building, you can see that, despite the fact that, yeah, like you said, a lot of these guys probably aren't going to be there, but they have got a lot to work with. And a lot of, when I say a lot to work with, a lot of that is still like draft picks that they got to go, players they got to get and then develop. But, there is some stuff there. And I mean, when you look at the standings, and that's the stats that Bruce is alluding to, Sixers are 2-21. Yeah, obviously that's terrible. The New York Knicks, with Phil Jackson at the helm, and granted, it's not like he's had enough time to really put his blueprint on this, but the Knicks have Amari and Carmelo and Shumpert and the worst player in the league, J.R. Smith, and they got who else we got? Bargnani. This team is 5-20. They're 2 games better than the Sixers. Detroit, who I believe who is our second win, they're 5-19. They're 2.5 games. Is that correct? Yeah, 2.5 games better. Minnesota is 5-17. There are so many shitty teams. Obviously, when we're watching the Sixers and we know about the 0-17 start, there are a bunch of god awful teams. And the fact that the Sixers are bad, we know that that's kind of what they plan for. And it's not planning for being bad necessarily. It's planning to not waste money, which the NBA is basically set up to do, to have mid-level teams or even good teams in a lot of cases, but mostly mid-level teams blow money on mid-level players, giving them all-star type contracts. The Sixers saying, and Sam Hinkie specifically saying, we're not going to do that shit. We're going to spend our money wisely. We're going to set ourselves up for the future. At some point, there's going to be that time where we go ahead and make a trade, like for James Harden or like for Dwight Howard, like Daryl Morey did in Houston. And if you didn't know, Houston is where Sam Hinkie came from. Then there's a time where you go and you flip the script and you start to make some trades, the ones that don't get you second-round picks in 2020. But there's going to be that time. But for now, we're not going to say we're just going to spend money for the sake of spending money. We're going to put together a plan in place, which they had done the moment Hinkie got here and the moment Brett Brown got here. And they talked about their plan for the future. They were proactive, like we talked about the Phillies not being. And now they're sticking to that plan. You can't abort ship. And the fact is, even though we haven't seen all of them play, like Saric and Jordan McRae, and of course, help me out here, Joel Embiid. We got how can I not remember anything right now? Yeah, he hasn't played a game, but he's like the Twitter gangster.
Here's the thing. I kind of look at the Sixers as a marriage. I love this team. This is a team that I have probably followed in Philadelphia longer than any of the other Philadelphia franchises. Mostly because I started playing basketball, when I was 4 or 5 years old. So I just loved the game. I loved watching them. Right now, the Sixers are doing something that, as a fan, I never thought I'd see them do. If I had a vote, I would have disapproved of. But they're in it. And because I love them, I'm going to stick by their side. And that's why I likened it to a marriage, because that's kind of how that goes. You just stick with your partner and you ride it out. And that's what we're doing right now. That's what it's all about.
Word up. That's all I can say about that. And before we get off the topic of the Sixers, we do need to talk about the guy who's, I guess you could say arguably, but probably not playing the best basketball right now. And I guess you say arguably because, there's still times where you shake your head. But looking at that really nice mugshot of MCW right now.
6'6", 190 pounds stature. I'm just going to say, for anyone who's never met me, I'm about 5'11", and I'm about 184. So that is just mind-blowing. And that kind of makes a lot more sense as to why he's not able to enforce his will upon defenses now. And now I see he's 190 pounds. There's a lot of times when Michael Carter-Williams is looking to drive the ball, and he has had some more success lately, but guys bully him around, and you can see that. He's athletic, and he's got a lot of heart, but what I like is that his ceiling is still, he hasn't reached it yet. He's still got work to do, and he can still get a lot better.
Yeah, and since I guess we're doing the height and weight check, 5'9", 163. Ding, if we were on the Dan Patrick Show. He's got some stuff to go developmentally. We know, more time in the weight room. He's not as young as you would think, 23, but more time in the weight room, obviously developing his game. My biggest thing is, and he's playing some real good basketball right now, he needs to be more aggressive offensively. And I think, we see here last 10 games, he's got, 16 and a half points. Just looking at the last 5 games, a little under 14 shots a game. I want to see that up. You're on a bad team that doesn't have many great offensive players. And, after he won the Rookie of the Year, a lot of people want to say, oh, well, he's getting all these great stats because he's, putting up so many shots. Actually, last year, that is for his career, he's put up 15 shots a game. So now he's actually putting up less shots on a worse team. And I don't even buy in, first of all, to the idea that he's on a worse team, so he's padding his stats. Assists come from other players making shots. So, and rebounds, obviously the Sixers don't have like Embiid playing right now, and Noel, could be better at rebounding, but he's a good rebounding guard. You can't take that away from him. But I want to see him be a little bit more aggressively, just like we talk about with Nerlens. And if he does that, and obviously limits the turnovers, and like we talked about too, and like Malik Rose talks about on the Sixers broadcast, some of those turnovers come from his lack of scoring aggressiveness. If he starts to do that, I think you're going to see those turnovers come down a little bit. Obviously, the scoring goes up. And, I think it'll just help the team overall. But again, we're not even talking about this year because this is just development for the long term. And, I think it is bright. We just got to see what happens.
I totally agree with you. And that's why I said earlier, I see tons of improvement in different elements of the game for them. I see guys that at the beginning of the year look completely lost, offensively, defensively, heart, energy levels, guys that I didn't think, had a place in the NBA in general. Which, if you listen to our first podcast, that's a lot of the reason why I had so much passion when talking about this team, because, it's one thing to tank to be, to be bad and try and get picks. But, what as fans, all we really want to see is, some semblance of hope for the future. And, being able to be bad to stockpile draft picks is one thing. If you're listening to us right now, we haven't even one time talked about, what being bad and getting these draft picks is going to lead to as far as future players. And that's because we don't know. And so as fans, that's very disheartening. So being able to see success and improvement right there in front of us, even if it's just small, little steps, is good. I talked about it being like a marriage. I'm going to compare it to raising a child, just it's a long process that you go through. And being able to see that improvement on a game to game basis now is important. It's important for us to stick around, which, the Sixers should care about, just looking at the roster here, I don't know how many of our listeners actually watch Sixers games. I know a lot of people don't. But, some of the guys, Henry Sims is a guy that I'm watching, make improvements. One of the guys I feel has earned a spot, I hope, on this team, but one way or another, this is a guy that you will hear for years to come in the NBA. And I can't believe I'm saying it, because just looking at it, I didn't think Robert Covington. He's obviously a shooter, 3-point shooter. I think he's missed 3 free throws or something like that all year long. And he isn't, he's played now in about 15, games or so. But he's a legitimate NBA player. And he adds an element to the Sixers, especially Michael Carter Williams' game. They called him Carter Williams' new toy, because he's a guy that, is a pressure release. Mike Carter-Williams is diving in, trying to drive the ball. Covington, if he can sneak out, he's got enough guts to hit, threes and when he does drive himself, get fouled, and he can hit free throws, which we all know the Sixers struggle with. These are things that are very important for the fan base to see. And whether or not he sticks around and finds a place here on this team, this is a guy that has definitely excited me and should excite you as well.
I'm so glad that you brought up the free throw thing because I'm looking it up now. For a team that's so just pathetic from the line, this guy, as of today, is shooting 92.1% from the line. I don't even need to look it up. I know they're by far the worst free throw shooting team in the league, despite his ability to shoot free throws, which I never thought I'd say that phrase in my life. But yeah, I mean, he's shooting over 47% from three. He's definitely playing really well. And this goes to this speaks directly to the people that are like, the Sixers are just bringing in scrubs to try to lose. No, they got this guy from the D League who other people weren't given a chance to. We give this guy a chance. He's 24, by the way. It's not like he was just like, this is his first year, or he's played 1 year, rather, I should say. I believe that was with Internet Houston. There's a connection. But this is a guy that, you're given a chance to, and now you're showing, is he going to be an all-star or even a starting player on most teams? Probably not. But this is a guy that is a piece to a championship puzzle. Is it going to be the Sixers? We don't know. Do we wind up trading him and getting like 3 second-round picks in return? I don't know, maybe. But this is the type of thing that you don't always have the luxury. If you're like a winning team and fighting for a playoff spot, you don't have the luxury of just like bringing in some guy from the D League. You only really have that luxury when you're a bad team. But at the same time, I don't really, and maybe it's just because I don't know the other teams, I don't recall another time or another team even bringing in a bunch of guys that you're giving them a shot, and a lot of them fail. But you're finding some diamonds in the rough, and maybe diamonds is too strong, but and now you're understanding, okay.
Cubic zirconium.
Yeah. I mean, really, maybe even just some like good-looking plastic. Finally, even though we said he was better, what's his name? Number 0 is off. I'm not going to remember any names in this podcast, but Brandon Davies. No, I will. I'm going to remember them after I try to say them. That's what happened every time. But yeah, you got some guys that, they're not going to return to be anything, but you're afforded that luxury by saying, we are sticking to our plan. We don't give a shit about what the media says. So, you know what? I'm down with that.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what. Anyone that watched that Memphis game yesterday, you saw, even though we lost, which we've said a lot, you saw, I guarantee you that if you asked the majority of the teams the Sixers have played, including the Memphis Grizzlies, who have the second best record in the NBA, they will tell you that this team isn't losing because of heart. That this team has a bunch of guys that go out there and give every last ounce of energy they have. They've the win-loss record at the end of the season will not show what, as men, this team has been able to accomplish. But as fans, I think it's important to look at each player individually and just, and that's something I think it's easy for Philadelphians to do. We naturally pick up on that kind of stuff. I think it's important for us to gauge them on that, just because that's really all we've got right now as far as the tangible aspect to being able to have a positive outlook on this team. And like I said, I've been a Sixers fan for a very long time in my life. And that's what's going to keep me tuning in to each and every night that they play. And I mean, there's tons of other things I could do with my time, But I feel like I've got a little part in this, and when this turns around, which it will, I'll be able to say I've been there since the beginning.
Word. That's all I got to say.
Let's move on. Let's talk some birds.
Yeah. Well, no, we're not going to talk some birds because we got some birds, Cowboys to watch.
Oh, we're gonna go ahead and watch the game, and then we'll get back to you guys about that because talking Eagles victories takes a long time.
Not only that, but so does losing. And if they lose, I'm going to lose my shit. But we're going to break that down. And I'm typically optimistic, but we'll see how that goes. But we'll be back with you in a number of hours. And we'll be talking some Eagles football. All right.
I've enjoyed it. Go Bears.
I'm never chasing love, it's just controlling me. I swear this shit got a hold of me. Gotta go for mine, and I can't give up. To the day I see my parents straight living it up. My dreams not Benzes and a big ass trust. Got the weed and the slits, living it up. Whoa.
So, back here at Bruce&Bryant. And it is not the hours after the game. In fact, it is the next day. Let's just say it would have been bad had we needed to discuss this Eagles game after what happened. And as you had heard, we had already been drinking in hype and anticipation of the football game. I decided to stop. My friend Bruce, who is absent at the moment, wanted to wallow in it, which I can understand. So, speaking probably not a strong suit in that hour. But really, I'm just back for a quick moment. I think the wounds are still far too fresh to really break down what happened. I think reality is setting in that barring unreal circumstances, ironically, the circumstances that got the Eagles into the playoffs and got them to the NFC Championship game in 2008, I want to believe. Excuse me. Yes, I believe in 2008, where they lost to the Cardinals in the NFC Championship game. That scenario is basically what you're looking at with 2 games to play and certainly very far behind the 8 ball. But breaking that game down right now still would be too frustrating. I think we're gonna leave that to next week. And so we can really talk about, especially with Bruce Banner's absence right now. We don't want to get into that too much, but all I will say is when the ball was blown over to start, or before the start of the game, before the kickoff, Bruce turned to me, clapping his hands, say, that's a great sign. And then, of course, we decided not to field the kick. And for as much shit as people are going to give Huff, I don't see how that's his fault. Partly his fault with communication, but reality is he'd be sprinting up really from at least 20 yards deep to try to catch that ball. I think that's Brad Smith. But anyway, one omen followed by a far bigger omen, of course, the comeback. And then the collapse to follow. But we will talk about that next time. We'll certainly know a little bit more about the playoffs. And the Cowboys got a big game against Indy coming next week. So, it's not like it's out of the realm of possibility. But let's just say odds are not forever in our favor. But again, this is Bruce&Bryant, sans Bruce, for the conclusion of this podcast, and I'll let my cuz Gabriel take it away. Thanks for listening.
So I used to get high just to get smacked, but now I get high for perception. It's the sense of things. You know what I mean? And you about to understand that real soon. Real soon.